with the hope that both Mark and the board member from Newark will be joining us shortly, I definitely want to respect everyone's time. So without further ado, I will begin today's Regional Policy Board meeting. And if you just bear with me for a second, I want to make sure. Bobby?
¿Qué?
Okay, I just muted everybody. Bobby, can you please let me know if we are recording?
Yes, Louise posted that we are live now.
Great. Okay, again, my name is Karen Russell, and I am the Mission Valley SELPA Director, and I'd like to welcome everyone here to the March 23rd, 2021 Regional Policy Board meeting. Typically, we do begin with introductions, so if you don't mind, if we could please start with our superintendents and board members and go around and introduce ourselves today. Christopher, do you mind beginning?
I don't mind at all. CJ Kamick, Superintendent, Fremont Unified School District.
Larry Sweeney, Board Member, Fremont Unified School District.
John Thompson, Superintendent of New Haven Unified School District.
Michael Gonzalez, New Haven Unified School District Trustee. Sorry about that.
Great, and can we have our directors weigh in?
Jane Hamilton, Director of Special Education, Newark Unified School District. Good morning, everyone.
Fran English, Director for Fremont Unified School District.
And Sarah Kapler, Director in New Haven Unified.
Great. And then we have Andrea Rodriguez, who is our parent representative representing our Community Advisory Council at this point. Robbie, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Robbie Pascual, Fremont Unified School District, and acting as Mission Valley SELPA accounting person.
Great. And Ms. Munoz, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, is this Gabriela Munoz? Is a parent for Cabrillo Elementary.
Welcome, we're so happy to have you join us. All right, I will be then now switching to the screen share, which will show our agenda for today. All right, and for our public, if the public, anyone viewing would like to submit some input, we have guidelines for that input. Here you can see that it can be recorded on a Google Doc, and we will have our Director Kapler access that Google Doc before the end of today's meeting to be able to review if there's any additional public information. I did want to welcome our newer board members to the Regional Policy Board, and that would be Michael Gonzalez as well as Ms. Martinez. Michael, is there anything that you would like to add in terms of introduction?
No, that I'm a regular general ed teacher. And so I've been teaching for the last 15 years. I teach in Hayward Unified School District. So that's it.
Great. Thank you very much. Again, to all of our superintendents as well as the board members, we really appreciate your time here today to go over the information for our SELPA. One of the things in the Mission Valley SELPA, and I'll kind of pull this up right now, is that, again, we're 3 districts together: Newark, New Haven, Fremont. In addition, we are serving, I think at this point, over 6,500 kids with IEPs. Okay. A little bit more information is, of course, on all 3 of the districts, if you care to look at that. Let's move on to item numbers 2, which is the minutes of our December 15th meeting. Bobby, when I actually looked through those minutes, I did see a very small typographical error on it's number 3. It's the third paragraph, and that should read 2021. It was just a small typographical error.
Karen,
Yes.
I see that in terms of number of schools, it says 1 high school for New Haven, but we do have 1 high school and 1 alternative high school. And so I wonder, perhaps those weren't counted, or we want to list those differently, but typically we would say we have 2, plus we do have an independent study school. So
thanks, Sarah. I will note that maybe one comprehensive high school and then the other.
okay, thank you.
Having a chance to review those Regional Policy Board minutes from December 15th, 2020, are there any other corrections or comments?
Excuse me, Karen, can you let Dr. Triplett in? He's in the waiting room.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Got it. Okay. Welcome, Mark. All right. Hearing no other objections, then do I have a motion to approve the Regional Policy Board December 15th minutes?
Move for approval with the amendment referenced by Karen.
Great.
Second the approval.
Great. So the minutes have been moved for approval. We have a second. All those and again, are obviously our voting members are our superintendents and our board members. All those in favor of approving the minutes, can you indicate by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Abstention?
Okay.
Aye.
All right. It looks like we have 3 ayes and 1 abstention. I'm just trying to, let's see. So we should have
5.
Yeah. Do you have that, Bobby?
I do.
Okay.
Did Mark vote?
I did. Hi, everybody. I voted aye.
Okay.
This is Larry. I abstained because I wasn't present. Thank you.
Okay. So CJ and John and Mark were ayes.
And Larry was an
Larry abstained. Michael?
I abstained also. I wasn't present.
Okay. And that's 5.
Okay, thank you.
And then can I just double check that was CJ that motioned and Larry seconded, correct? I can't see the full screen, so I can't tell really who's talking.
I motioned, I believe Superintendent Thompson was the second.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. We'll move on now to item number 3, which is the Mission Valley SELPA's Administrative Unit Operating Budget. And Robbie, would you mind leading us through this budget?
Yes, ma'am. So what's in front of you is the updated administrative unit projected operating budget for fiscal year 2021. This is as of March 9, 2021. What you see is our budget. Total revenue budget is $286,000 with $70,000 that is carryover from prior year. We don't actually receive the allocation until we finally receive all of the allocation from the state, and that usually happens at the end of the fiscal year. The operating expenditures remain the same, except for the Special Olympics. There was a budget amount of $10,000. We took that out per the request of the Mission Valley SELPA Director Karen Russell, and so we moved that $10,000 to the other operating expenditures, which is unallocated right now. So the total amount on the unallocated is $20,744. It's towards the end of this what you see in the screen. Um, and then what the board approved last September 29, the prior year carryover of $70,927 was allocated to the different districts, and that was already given out. The funds already went out to the trade districts based on ADA. And so total expenditures is 286, the same amount as our revenue or budgeted revenue. And our total expense, including encumbrances, which means the set aside of money, is $210,000 or almost $211,000. And what is unallocated is 75, almost $76,000 with $8,300 as reserve, which is equivalent to 1%. Um, that's my update on the administrative unit operating budget.
As Robbie had said, in previous years, we had collaborated with Special Olympics, and this year, between a decision of the special ed directors, getting input from our teachers within the district, we had opted not to move forward with that collaboration with the Special Olympics. We are meeting later this year with them to look how we can maybe continue that in the following year. But in this year, that $10,000 was then taken out of the budget. And as Robbie said, by putting that back into other, that will most likely then be allocated back to the districts. Do we have any other questions on the operating budget for the SELPA?
I think Sarah has one.
Okay, Sarah?
Hi, I wanted to just point out that typically we would put that back to the districts, and I'm in full support of that. However, this year is unique in that we are expecting some learning loss claims, and typically that wouldn't come to the SELPA, but I'm wondering if we wouldn't want to hang on to the expenditures just and then put it back in the district right at the end of the fiscal year, just when we're through that time period, so that we don't have to recollect from the districts in the event of the unforeseen.
So, Robbie, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I just want to see if I understand it properly. So at the end of this fiscal year, if we do have some carryover, usually at the beginning of next fiscal year, we would allocate that to the different districts. But you are recommending that we don't allocate that until the end of 2021-22. Am I understanding you, Sarah?
I think you are. I think what I was suggesting is different. Is usually somebody would make a motion to return it to the districts now. And all I'm saying is there may be an unforeseen expense we don't usually have. And that although I want it to count for the 21-22 school year, if this board decides, I would like to wait just a little longer to make sure that we don't need that for increased legal fees or other fees we may not be able to anticipate.
So just to let the process usually is we wait until the end actually ended.
Oh,
and
okay.
the next fiscal year is when the motion that you mentioned happens.
And then it would count for 21-22?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I did not understand that. Thank you for explaining that to me.
Okay.
And I think, Sarah, this year, obviously, with a number of the budget items not being fully expended, again, anything that's not expended will, of course, be redistributed back to the districts based on the ADA. All right, hearing no further questions on the administrative unit budget for the SELPA, may I please get a motion to approve the current operating budget?
This is Larry, move to approve.
Thank you, Larry. And may I please get a second?
This is Mark. I'll second.
Thank you, Mark, with the second. All those in favor of approving the operating budget for the Mission Valley SELPA at this time, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Do we have any abstentions? And do we have any nays? All right, so Bobby, that looks like 5 ayes, no abstentions, no A's, and the Mission Valley SELPA operating budget is approved at this time. Thank you. Next on our agenda, number 4, is the 2021 Mission Valley SELPA revised allocations. Robbie, do you mind taking us through those revised allocations and some of the salient points regarding the changes in the allocation for this year?
Yes. So in the cover letter, um, the big difference from the prior allocation that we had is the one that I have it italicized, um, which is trying to see if I could move. There you go. Uh, um, so first of all is that the P1 certification from the state was approved or certified last February 19, 2021. The funding rate did not change. It's still $625 per projection. And what was approved by of course, by the state of California or the governor. So that is the first bullet. The second one that changed also was bullet number, the fifth bullet, which I italicized. Low incidence rate increased from a projected $466 to $3,050. So that's a big jump based on the P1 certification. So there's an increase of good $2,600 for low incident pupils.
Robbie, excuse me, I'm going to interrupt just for a second to further explain that a little bit more. When the legislature was asked how to support special education in greater detail, they talked about, well, let's focus on those students whose needs are most severe. And that is why we're seeing just a huge increase in the amount projected for our low incidence population. And again, low incidence is defined as our students that are blind, deaf, or orthopedically impaired. And so many of our students who are also multi-handicapped fall into that category. But that's, as we go further and look at to the budget, you'll see that that's a huge increase in our allocation.
Okay. So the next big change was in the last bullet of the first page of the cover letter, which is the special ed mental health services. So before, in the past, this special ed mental health services is only for special ed. But effective 2021, the special ed mental health is now changed to mental health related services. And these funds can be used to provide all mental health related services for pupils with or without an IEP. So that is a big change. So before it was just for special ed, now it can be for all students. Um,
Robbie, I'm sorry, I'll interrupt just a second again. And this is a very important change. Certainly, we want to make sure this doesn't take away mental health dollars for our students with IEPs. But as we are seeing increased dollars come into districts for the mental health services, how this helps districts is, as you're all aware, with the special education budget, there's the concept of maintenance of effort, which means once the budget is set at a certain level, districts cannot go below that budgeted amount. But at this point, then, now these special education dollars that Robbie is referring to can be spent and taken through the special ed budget, or they can be applied more in terms of general ed. So this can really be helpful in terms of us being able to maintain that maintenance of effort.
So in addition to that one is that special ed already spent all of this money. There are probably a few districts that doesn't spend it all. Uh, Fremont is one of them that there is a little bit of carryover from prior year. Not that much, is probably less than $100,000, but I just wanted to make sure that we are aware of that one. If you don't spend it, because you are already spending it for behaviorists, uh, paraprofessionals, so that those kind of positions.
Yes.
And
And I would, of course, acknowledge what Robbie has saying, that every single one of our districts, the special education budget exceeds that which we receive from federal and state government, and there certainly is contributions required from the general education budget.
Sarah, you raise your hand. You're muted.
Yes, I just wanted to say, like, I appreciate the point that we spend exceeding the amount of mental health dollars, but what I like about it is it allows us to use our psychologists, our behavior specialists, our mental health therapists without having to track so closely that they only work with special ed students. It allows for a more inclusive model, and that is one benefit that I see coming out of this.
And it also curtails students being referred to special education that really may not need it at a tier 1 or 2 level as well.
I agree, and it addresses some of our issues around disproportionality. Say in Fremont Unified, where over-identification of students, their mental health needs can be addressed prior to requiring an IEP.
So in front of you right now is the funding exhibit. This is similar to the state exhibit. We just put it in our own particular spreadsheet so that uh, we can calculate properly and see how it flows. So here on section A is the ADA. Before it was an average of the 3 years that we were talking about at the beginning of the fiscal year, but now it is actually the highest ADA of the 3 years. Current year, previous year, and uh, previous year.
And then I will interject here. This is very significant for all three of our districts, which are currently in declining mode. And so, as Robbie has pointed out, we were able to take advantage of a higher ADA for our funding.
Yes. So the cliff is not that steep if you go by current year, if you are declining enrollment. Section 2, you would see how we were funded before. We were funded by $557.27 per ADA. Now the funding is 625. So and then we get the general funding, which is section C, and then also including the property tax that is excluded from the total amount of the grant. So total grant, the base is 31.7 million, less the 3.4 million. We're going to get a net funding of 28.2 from the state. Then we add um, program specialist, research specialist funding, which is 830 I could not see that much. $135,000, I believe. Um, so that actually goes to the three districts and also for the administrative AU budget. This is where the low incidence number is. We get $945,000 out of home care of 63,000, and then section I, which is the summary of all of our apportionment, less the property tax that we're going to get from Alameda County Office of Ed. The total is $30.1 million for all three districts. So the next spreadsheet, this is our distribution. Um, so we are still funded by the highest of the 3 years, but our allocation when we divide the money is based on the current year. So um, just want to let you know that in some of the grants, so for AB 602, the regular special ed funding, $20.6 million is going to go to Fremont, 6.3 million, New Haven, and 3.3 million for Newark.
So I'm just going to interrupt again, Robbie, as you know, for everyone on our call today, when we look at the distribution, and this is the total enrollment between the three districts, 68% of that total number is Fremont, 21% is New Haven, and then about 11% is Newark.
Yes. And from section line item number 7 to the last item are the different grants that we receive from the state. Most of the grants we have not received from the state, the actual grant award letter. One good example is the local assistance. As of now, we have not received the grant award notification yet. The federal preschool, we have not received those. Um, the I think the mental health, this section 9, mental health allocation, this is the federal part of the mental health. This is still for special ed. It is only on, if you scroll down some more, Karen, it is on section 15. This mental health services is the one that is for both with IEP and without IEP. So for mental health services, same thing. We have not received the actual grant award letter from the state, but we are projecting, and also we are already receiving some of the funds. But the actual grant award notification, there's no final one yet. And just want to add something for next year. For Fremont Unified School District, our ADA would increase. The reason why it would be increasing next year is COIL, the charter school that Fremont has, left Mission Valley SELPA or Fremont Unified School District for the special ed program and moved to another SELPA in 19 to start they left in 1920 and 2021, but they're coming back in 21-22. So I just want to let everybody know that that is coming for next year. And that ends my presentation.
Thank you so much, Robbie. Do we have any questions on the distribution exhibit? I think some big takeaways are definitely the low incidence funds in terms of the increase, as well as that flexibility with the mental health dollars. So thank you very much, Robbie, for explaining that in greater detail to us all. May I please get then a motion to approve the Mission Valley SELPA revised allocation?
This is Larry, so moved.
Thank you, Larry.
Approve.
I'm sorry, who do we get a second on that?
Approve.
Okay.
Michael, second.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. All right, so the revised allocation is presented by our Robbie. Will now is moved for approval. We have a second. All those in favor, please indicate by aye.
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 Do we have any abstentions? And do we have any nays? Hearing no abstentions or nays, the revised allocation is approved. Number 5, as we move forward, is the Bay Area Master Contract. What this is, and for many of our superintendents and board members are very familiar with this, for any of our students in any of the special ed programs who are placed in a non-public school, the district engages with that non-public school using a contract. The state SELPA organization puts together the framework of this contract, and then the local Bay Area Collaborative, which includes school districts in Alameda and Contra Costa County, revise it with some small edits. Basically, what the contract allows for is for the district to engage with another non-public school, and the contract talks about the terms, the services, maintenance of records, insurance that non-public school needs to maintain. It would specifically outline the services that student is going to be receiving, and as well as assurances that the non-public school will also be following the provisions of IDEA. Typically, as a regional policy board, we approve the use of this contract for the following year, 21-22, and then each school district can review it with their business office and decide if there's any additions that they need to make. Do we have any questions or comments on the master contract? Sarah, did you have any comments? Okay. All right. Hearing no comments, then I would like to ask if someone would put a motion to approve the use of the Bay Area Collaborative Master Contract for the 21-22 school year.
So moved.
This is
Thank you.
John, I'll second.
Great. Thank you for seconding, John. All those in favor of using the Bay Area Master Contract for the 21-22 school year, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Do we have any abstentions? And any nays? Hearing no nays or abstentions, the motion passes.
Karen,
Yes,
who initially made the motion, please?
CJ.
Thank you.
thank you, CJ.
And I think I was on mute when I voted in the affirmative, so apologies.
Thank you. Moving on to number 6, as Sarah had alluded to, we know as districts that many of our students have had challenges this last year, or this year, as it's been provided to them via distance learning, and many of our students with IEPs have struggled considerably. The California Department of Ed has recognized this, and they allow districts to apply for grants. And the Mission Valley SELPA was approved for $70,000 to work on with our parents to look at those issues around learning loss. The Alameda County SELPA directors had met several times this year and are working to put together a process by which our teams at the sites can look at the concerns that our families are bringing forward and have a really systematic process for authentically listening to what those families' concerns are. Again, knowing that our students are our top priority, but really actively listening with empathy and respect to our families, helping them to define what the problem is and possibly reframe solutions. As many of you know, for our families, they may feel that now my child needs Lindamood Bell because their reading is somewhat delayed. And we want to listen to say, we understand that you have some concerns about the progress that your child's making in reading. And this process is one by which we hope to work with our sites to help them to be able to go through acknowledging what the concerns are, really focusing on data collection, because this is going to be an important part of how we're able to adequately address those concerns. This goes with a considerable amount of training for then our site teams of how they gather those records. This last year, obviously, where there's going to be a lot of inconsistency in terms of what's been happening and how we're going to be able to kind of, I think, gather some of the baseline data. But if we look towards last year and where the student was, that's going to also be important. We want to hold IEP meetings, talk about what solutions that we can provide via the IEP. We certainly want to resolve and be very creative in how we address the concerns. But we know there will be some families for whom the IEP process is not one in which those concerns can be resolved. That being said, we really want to seek what alternative ways we can come together with an agreement. That being said, the final option that parents certainly always have is to pursue due process. As districts, we want to really maximize everything we can do prior to due process, because as we all know that going into due process becomes a very costly endeavor for both our families as well as the districts. So this is one of the things that the SELPA organization in Alameda County has come to provide, looking to really work with districts to do more training for site teams to use this process. Any questions or comments on this? Okay. All right. Without, then we will move on to number 7. And number 7 is our monitoring activities. Monitoring activities being how the California Department of Ed has been working with our districts on 2 different levels. 1, a special education plan, and 2, what's called the Comprehensive Coordinated Early Learning Plan. And I'm just going to, I want to acknowledge the work that all 3 of the directors and the teams have been doing to develop these plans. Every single one of the directors has been working weekends and evenings, working with sites and staff to develop these plans. And this has been really an additional challenge in terms of the time, because obviously everyone is working so hard right now to address the needs related to distance learning. But that being said, focus on this area is extremely important. I'm going to pull up the first district data, and this looks at all 3 of our districts. One of the main priorities from the California Department of Ed is, are we holding our IEPs? Are we holding our triannual reviews? I think in the beginning of the year, we had a little bit more difficulty, but I think all 3 of our districts and all of our teachers and program specialists have worked really hard to now make sure that we hold our IEPs when they are due, which is a federal requirement, as well as our triennials. So if you look at our information right now, if Fremont has 3,800 kids, we have at this point about almost 5% annual IEPs and 3% overdue triennials. Newark, again, about 5% overdue annuals with 5% overdue triennials. New Haven, 1.4 overdue annuals and less than 0.3 overdue triennials. So as we look at this specific data, kudos to New Haven to really focusing on holding those IEPs, whether it's an annual IEP or a triennial IEP. And again, I want to appreciate that the numbers in both Fremont and Newark indicate that both districts are working really hard to get hold those IEPs. I can speak to the fact that oftentimes it's been difficult to coordinate with families. Is there anything else, Jan or Fran, you would like to say about your numbers specifically?
Yeah, I think you said it very eloquently. Contacting families has been challenging, particularly at the high school level. That's been a big one. And then we've seen an increase of referrals for special education with distance learning, which has also impacted our numbers.
Yes, agreed. You would think communication would be easier in the age of Zoom and what have you, but it's actually been a challenge for some of our families to, quote, get to meetings even in a virtual format. So we continue to work with them collaboratively and try to get them access to technology so that they can participate. And if nothing else, we're also holding meetings by phone. So
I think the other challenge is that we've been doing our initials in person and we have limited staffing to do that. So trying to be defensible sometimes can sort of set you a set behind as well. But hopefully that will come out well at the end of the day.
Right. Right. Thank you guys both. I'm going to move now into a little bit more of the specifics regarding the monitoring status. At this point, Fremont, as well as New Haven, have had their comprehensive coordinating early intervention plans approved. And this is very significant because it also is 15% of their special ed budgets are going to be now focused on the early intervening services that they've developed. As you can see, New Haven is working on where they've disproportionately identified African American students for orthopedic impairments, as well as issues around discipline. And Fremont is working on their over-identification of Hispanic students identified as specific learning disability, as well as white students identified as emotionally disturbed, and those with other health impairment. You become significantly disproportionate when you have been disproportionate for 3 years in a row. And so that's what the data here is showing. And I want to again give Sarah and Fran and the teams in both those districts considerable amount of praise for really working on creating stakeholder groups, looking at the data, going back to the data again, really trying to examine what is the root cause of why the district is seeing this kind of disproportionality, and then developing some very specific intervention plans. And I really recommend that if the superintendents haven't already sat down with their directors and gone over those plans in detail, to really do so, because a tremendous amount of work's been put together, and those plans then are in the process right now of being implemented. In addition to this coordinated, comprehensive early intervening plan, our districts are also developing a special education plan. And the special education plan is involved in addressing the indicators. And these are our 18-19 indicators. Again, it feels oftentimes when we are addressing these deficits at district that we're doing so far behind. But as you can see, Fremont was looking at graduation rate. They were looking at least restrictive environment issues. They also were looking at outcomes for preschool students. You can see that New Haven was also looking at graduation rates, academic performance on measures in English language and math, as well as preschool. So each of the directors worked with teams within their districts and developed very detailed, specific plans on how to address each of these issues. At this point, I'd love for Fran and Sarah and Jan to comment, because all three of you guys have been working on this, a little bit more on your plans.
I can go first. So I actually found the process very rewarding. It was challenging, it was in depth, but I got to meet a lot of people in the district that maybe I wouldn't have known as well if I hadn't spent so many hours in committees with them. So we actually enjoyed the process, if nothing more than we learned a lot about the district. With regards to each of these, we found that undergrad rate, there was almost a direct correlation between the percentage of our senior students with IEPs who don't graduate and their attendance. So we were looking, we're thinking district-wide, looking at attendance would be very wise. And so that's what we'll be focusing on, is giving high school administrators a lot of tools to work with students on improving attendance. And then also, naturally, the rest of these lend themselves well to our MTSS work, our UDL work, our RTI work, and getting students into the least restrictive environment through more inclusive practices.
Yeah, I did echo what Fran just mentioned, and I think for us, I think the analysis was extremely helpful to really look at the root cause, and then set out a plan that we can really address some of those. And one of the big areas of our focus has been on English language arts and math, and that access to inclusive practices. I think we truly believe if students have foundational skills, they can then access general education programs, and that impacts attendance, graduation rates. It's sort of like a cascade of things that happen as a result of student self-esteem going up with the skills they need to access. So it was very, very enjoyable process, and Dr. Triplett actually attended some of those meetings, which was to be commended as well.
For New Haven, many of the same items. MTSS is actually one of our board goals, and now included in our LCAP. And so the increase in special ed, general ed inclusivity has really been helpful. I think it's challenging to have so many indicators, but working on preschool inclusion, working on our partners with our vendor, Kidango, looking at how we do professional development, not special ed specific or general ed specific, but combining those, and working on MTSS are some really big ticket items. In addition, we have embarked on a very ambitious process to choose an anti-racist PD provider for our system, working with our labor partners. We're deep into that process. And so we have some very large items attached to our special ed plan or our CSACE plan. And, we have high hopes that they will make a real difference in the outcomes for our students.
Thank you, Sarah. One of the things, the conversation that came up with Fran and I, and it's been echoed by the other directors, it's been echoed by SELPA directors throughout the states. Why so many plans? It's very frustrating, I think, for special ed directors to do a special ed plan, then a coordinating services plan, and then we also have our LCAP. Many districts are working on differentiated assistance. It would be so helpful if these plans were kind of coordinated in one overall district plan. And not only that, when we look at special education and we have issues around disproportionality related to the identification of a certain group of students, that identification process really belongs back into general ed. And it's really the focus on how do we help and support our general education programs to be more responsive to student need so that they don't require an IEP. So many of these CSACE plans, the majority of the work is really focused in the general ed side of the house. And I think maybe as kind of Jan and Fran were talking about really closely working with those other departments, whether that is curriculum and instruction or maybe EL departments, to focus on how do we really build and support those strategies so students aren't at that point where they need an individualized education plan to address those educational needs or that access to education. I was really in each of the districts. Sarah did an incredible job with her stakeholder groups and engaging the community in very authentic discussions. Jan's certainly, I think, really the part that she worked on working with Dispro and English language learners was detailed and wonderful. And once again, Fran just worked really diligently back and forth with the state to make sure that those root causes and the strategies related linked up together to make some really dynamic plans. So again, I don't want this to have to feel like hoops that districts have to jump through to make sure that we address, because this is really important work around helping our kids stay in the least restrictive environment, getting our students with IEPs to graduate, making sure that as preschoolers that we are including our students, getting the best we can out of them in terms of English language arts and math performance. Any other comments from our directors or any comments from our board members?
Well, I wanted to thank you, Karen, for holding our hands along the way, especially when it got frustrating, because sometimes the templates are challenging. Just the logistics of trying to put the document itself together got to us at times. So thank you for your patience and for helping us with our FUMTA consultant and setting up those meetings. And yeah, I feel relieved that the process of doing the plan is complete now, and I look forward to actually implementing them. So.
I agree. Thank you, Karen.
I do. Thank you, Karen.
All right. As we meet, any other questions or comments?
Karen, I just want to extend my thanks to Director English and the directors from the other districts as well. I know they're working just as hard, but it's been quite a challenge, and just want to extend my compliments and appreciation.
Thank you.
And I echo Jay's sentiments. It's been I've watched what Sarah's done directly, and it's been a heck of a lot of work with a lot of pretty significant challenges.
Thank you, John.
And if I may, Karen, yeah, I agree. It's actually been a really, found it to be a really helpful process. Jan really led in an extremely thorough way and engaging lots of different stakeholders, which I think was really important. I do see on the agenda, it says Newark to be approved. Could you all clarify?
Sure. We just, Jan and I were working with Vincent Pastorini, and Jan has submitted everything. Vincent just is in the process of just doing kind of the final reviews. I'm sure he's going to be back to us within probably by the end of this week that everything is approved.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. All right, moving on to number 8. This is an interesting item. For many of you, you're very well aware that for close to 28 years, we have had a memorandum of understanding with California School for the Deaf for them to collaborate with the Mission Valley SELPA and provide services to students who are deaf. Typically, this resulted in the SELPA sharing a grant with them of a little over $200,000 each year. And for that amount of money, they provided services to anywhere from 12 to 34 infants in our program. This last year, and this is actually a trend throughout the state of California, we've seen a decrease in referrals for the infant program, as well as a decrease in referrals actually for our 3 to 5 populations. So as we were looking at our memorandum of understanding for the 21-22 school year, we were seeing that we did not have a significant number of students that would likely be participating in a center-based program, that which California for the School for the Deaf provides. The other interesting issue is, as the 3 districts have reported to me, and as well as Carly Kim and Allison Warner, the coordinator of the Infant Services Program, we have a changing dynamic in our students who are deaf. California's done a great job of early intervention so that when the time a child is born, they're initially screened for hearing. And what we're finding is that the hearing level of a student may not reach what we would consider typical, but the severity of that level is not as severe as has been in the past. So we may have children that are identified as unilaterally deaf, only they don't hear in one ear, or that hearing level in both ears is not as, again, severe as it has been in the past. What we're then typically finding with our families, and families, when we're working with our 0 to 3 population, are really an important piece of how we develop the plan moving forward. Our families are wanting services that address an oral language component, i.e., they want their child to speak, typically because they're hearing parents and they want their child to speak. This becomes very, very complicated in our deaf community because the research on deaf education is very clear. The important thing that we want to see in 0 to 3 is a language developed. And sign language is a very powerful tool for developing a language, a very successful tool for infants to get them, labeling a variety of things, matching those labels together, communicating their needs, whether it's I'm hungry or I'm sleepy or, I want my bottle. Or look at those beautiful trees. Those are tall trees. And it's been amazing to watch our 0 to 3 population use sign language to engage in very abstract and high level kinds of conversations. And so for a number of our infants, California School for the Deaf is going to be a very appropriate placement. But we are finding a greater number of parents wanting more of that oral language component. Since we had not had that as developed within our SELPA, many of those families went to a non-public school. And in the Bay Area, Gene Weingarten tends to be a program of choice, which is located across the Bay, which is problematic for us as a SELPA to have to be transporting 0 to 3-year-olds across the Bay. So what we have been talking about this coming school year is the infant program for the SELPA. The numbers look like it's about 12 infants at this point, but that the SELPA would be providing services for the majority of those students, and that we are not going to engage in a memorandum of understanding with CSD for the 21-22 school year, but rather contract with them individually for students. I don't know if any of our 3 directors would like to add anything to that topic, or if we have any questions from board members or superintendents. We hope that this choice for the 21-22 school year is very fluid, and that we have that opportunity to re-engage with California School for the Deaf in the future should the demographics kind of change of our infant population. Just as, again, as a broad overview, the Mission Valley SELPA, as you remember on the budget, receives monies for infants who are low incidence. So the school districts are responsible for providing infant family service plans to students 0 to 3 years of age who have been identified as deaf, blind, or orthopedically impaired. Okay.
Karen, I did, just to echo some of what you said, I did want to extend a thank you to CSD. Over the years, they've been such a powerhouse in deaf education and care so much about our families of children with DHH. So it's bittersweet, right? We don't have the students to support that MOU at this time, but we are hopeful, and we will continue to work with our school age students with CSD, because we do have here in Fremont anyways, we do have a fair number of students who attend CSD. It's a wonderful program. And so this is kind of hard to not have an MOU with them at this time, but of course we will continue to work with them. So just a thank you to CSD if you're out there listening.
And also too, that we want to collaborate as districts, and hopefully we'll be doing some information nights for parents regarding what are the programs and services that California School for the Deaf continues to offer, because certainly at any point in a student's career, that might be a very appropriate placement for them. I just wanted to, number 9, if we move on, is the local plan, which was approved by our board in June of 2020 and has just recently been approved by the Alameda County Office of Education this last month, and then submitted to the California Department of Ed for final approval as of March 15th, 2021. The state SELPA organization has had a number of different focuses, but one of the focus is the March finance report. And I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but there just was a couple of things I did want to highlight. I will acknowledge Anjanette Pelletier, who does the finance report for the SELPA and leads the organization into the analysis of how is California's budget doing, and specifically then how it relates to special education. But this was an interesting fact. California's unemployment rate since COVID obviously has dramatically increased. We've been able to see that number fall very slightly from 6.7 in December to 6.3 in January. And despite the fact that we have had an increased unemployment rate, if we kind of go down here to the preliminary general fund, personal income tax receipts to the general fund were still 9.8 billion above the forecast. So we, again, not to get too far off our regional policy board agenda, but to me, that was a staggering fact that despite increasing unemployment, that I guess the bottom line is some people are doing really well during the pandemic, that we've been able to see our budget as the state of California increase, which of course then bodes well for the budgets that we'll be receiving as school districts. This document goes into greater detail around maintenance of effort issues, as well as those increased low incidence funds. And should anybody care to go into this in greater detail, it's there as a resource. Comments or any questions regarding the fiscal finance report? Okay. As a state SELPA organization, we went over 3 assembly bills. Number one that we're all very familiar with, Assembly Bill 86, which talks about the $2 billion in instructional grants to be allocated to each of the districts by going in person by April 15th. It's my understanding that New Haven's board did vote to remain in distance learning for the remainder of the school year. Jan and Fran, are there any other updates for Newark or Fremont?
We're still working with our Labor departments to get an agreement, but we're hoping to return as soon as possible.
Yes, we as well are working with our bargaining units to potentially return this year.
2 other bills in front of the legislature that are very significant in terms of impacting special education is SB 692. And my understanding is for this bill that it is set for hearing on April 7th. This bill is about inclusion, and it would basically be requiring districts with greater incentives to create more inclusive opportunities for students with disabilities. The research is very clear that students who are included do better. And so that again is the focus of that bill. The next bill that is focused here is AB 1914. And this bill, excuse me. Let me kind of go down here. Yeah, I'm going to skip to SB 237. This bill is actually suspended right now, but this was creating a basically universal screener for all students who may be at risk for dyslexia. This bill was very interesting because the universal screener would be given to students between the grades of kindergarten to second grade, and then identify students with reading problems. What was some issues that the state SELPA had around this was calling it a dyslexia screener, because oftentimes reading issues between grades K to 2 will pop up and are not necessarily related to dyslexia, but may be related to that student's attendance or continuity in school. It may be related to second language acquisition factors. It may be related to other developmental factors. So this bill actually, as of the 22nd, was suspended, and I think going back to be revised. Okay. One of the things that Director Kapler had asked me to do and put on our agenda for today was learning loss plans and reopening plans. Where are we as separate districts? What resources exist out there for addressing learning loss? And the SELPA organization had put together, or not they hadn't, but they had referenced this document from, it was regarding best practices. It's the National Center on Learning Disabilities on how to address learning recovery. And it talks about different strategies that districts are using throughout the United States. This document would be really helpful for teams as they're sitting down developing the plans to address learning recovery. It talks about some really specific research-based approaches. It goes on. Really, one of the main things that they're focusing is using universal design for learning, looking at those multiple modalities, again, providing a lot more small group instruction opportunity for our students. I'm going to ask for our directors any kind of questions that you might have or comments that you might add to this at this time. We certainly, as a SELPA organization, as specific information comes through, I try to forward that to our directors. As you can imagine, you're very well aware, there are so many factors involved with, one, bringing our students back, making sure that our teachers are safe, making sure that our students are operating with safe kind of protocols, that the busing is safe for them. And again, all the different costs and just coordinating aspects is very, very complicated. One of the things that's clearly coming out that it's very important for districts to focus on activities over the summer to address learning recovery. And certainly districts are going to be responsible for continuing to offer extended school year programs for any of our students that require extended school year, but that districts would be wise to offer learning recovery options for all students over the summer.
Yeah. Thank you for adding this, Karen. I think we do, as I'm sure do the other districts, have a good learning loss plan. We are deep in summer planning for learning loss for all students, including special education. And I'm still interested in hearing about the good work and getting ideas from other districts as well. So I appreciate that.
And I will be sure to be passing on to our directors all information that comes through via the SELPA. Again, this whole year, as all of us know, has not been a lot of doom and gloom. There have been some things that actually have worked out very, very well. And one of those have been our SELPA activities that we've collaborated with our Community Advisory Council. As you know, we started the year with kind of a meet and greet of the district directors. And then in November, we did distance learning. In December, we did Zoom IEPs. In January, we did behavior is communication. And February 9th, self-care for parents. Each of these presentations have had at least 40 to 70 participants. This exceeds by huge numbers our participation in the last 5 years for events that have been sponsored by the SELPA. The March 9th presentation called Transitions, Now What? Focusing on our students with IEPs in high school, was attended by district transition staff as well as Aloni and Chabot. And this presentation was just so rich with resources for seniors right now that are looking to go into career as well as college opportunities, but also how does that parent of an 8th grader start working and planning on transition. So a really rich and wonderful presentation from our district staff. In April, we will have a Ledge Day where we're working on making appointments with our local legislators to advocate for special education needs. And this is typically attended by our district directors as well as parents from all 3 of the districts. And Bobby Platt, our district SELPA secretary, is working on helping us set up those appointments. The other day that's very important is in May, where we have our Special Education Recognition Awards. This will be held by Zoom, and nominations for this event will be going out by the beginning of April, where we seek nominations from our parents on who in their communities have been helpful for their child who has an IEP, and we'll be recognizing those participants or those nominees in May. I think I see Lisa Hillman as one of our teachers who's with us here today. And I know that Lisa has been a recipient of probably multiple Sarah Awards over the years, the incredible teacher that she is. We have one more Regional Policy Board meeting, which will be for this year, which is on June 22nd at the same time, 9 o'clock. That will be directly after the annual budget plan and annual service plan public hearing at 8 o'clock that morning. As directors, we continue to meet through the course of this year on issues related to special ed. And number 13 just is a review of our priorities as the Mission Valley SELPA. I will move on to number 14 and ask if there is anything else that our district special ed directors would like to comment on in terms of an update for our Regional Policy Board.
Well, I just wanted to, as Karen mentioned, sometimes it's important not to focus on the doom and gloom and the despair that some people have felt during this pandemic. I had just the most delightful opportunity to watch a speech therapist named Paul Oliphant from Glankler do his class the other day, and this guy had a guitar out and he's singing and the kids are singing with him, and it just reminded me of how hard our teachers, our service providers, our administrators are working to make sure students get the best that they can get in distance learning. And so just want to give a huge shout out to our educators for all their hard work.
I would reiterate what Fran has said, that the creativity and the dedication and the perseverance has just been remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to go on record as echoing that as well. I think it is a tribute to all teachers that they are reporting to be busier than ever. It's more complicated than ever. And yet we have had good parent attendance at things like our evening meetings. And so there have been some bright spots to pay attention to this. So I appreciate the hard work and effort, and I appreciate the things that we're going to choose to keep even after this time.
Yeah, I'd echo what Sarah and Fran have also said, and I'd also like to say that, you know, implementing some of the online learning opportunities we've had have been very successful, even though they're in that process still. Many of the parents have reached out and really appreciative of the different types of interventions and support students are getting, not just during synchronous time and asynchronous times, but any time that they need to get online to support their student in their learning. Additionally, I'd also like to say that teachers have reported, and I've actually been dropped in and seen teachers being, so well prepared and so engaging with their staff, not just teachers, but also paraeducators, really engaging with students and families alike. So kudos to them. And also the silver lining on distance learning has really been that collaboration and getting on a Zoom call as opposed to meeting people separately, doing it collaboratively. I think the preschool particularly have echoed that sentiment, that it's been very much collaborative and actually a time saver to get parents and the team members together in one room as opposed to meeting them on a one-to-one basis like we would do normally. So that's something we'll continue even when we're back in person. So that was a silver lining in all this. So thank you.
And I think that is a really important and kind of relevant analysis is, again, what has really worked, what's been improved during this last year. And I believe that there are considerable takeaways that are going to really be helpful in refining how we provide education services to our students. Do we have, Sarah, was there any public comment on non-agenda items that we need to address or be aware of?
No, there are no comments at this time.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any other items from our board? All right, hearing no other items from the board, I just, again, as typical, want to close with my thought for the day. And this is from Lev Vygotsky, who was a Russian neuroscientist. And he said, the teacher must adopt the role of facilitator, not content provider. And I think more than ever that when we talk about, again, these opportunities that have been created over this year, particularly as our students get older, that our teachers as helping our students become the architect of their learning. And this is a wonderful opportunity because it means that, number one, learning doesn't stop, but this is a process that continues on late into our lives, that we continue to seek out this content and hopefully continue to use the critical analysis and the abstract thinking that we can apply to this to give it meaning to us. We all know that the content from which all of us have access to is more than ever before in anyone's lifetime. And so being good consumers of that content, learned consumers of that content, is such a critical skill. And prior, I thought that it was interesting to reflect back on our thought for the day in March of 2020, which was that the Chinese character crisis is composed of two different characters, one being danger and the other being opportunity. And I just think as we've kind of closed our discussion today, that hopefully this year has afforded us with some real evident opportunities for new learning and for moving forward. Without any then further comment for today, I will again note our next scheduled meeting is June 22nd at 9 o'clock. I'll pause for a moment to see if there's any other comments. And then I will thank all of our board members very much for their very important time. And I will adjourn our meeting at 10:21.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks all. Good to see you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Right, take care all.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.